Welcome to Career and Leadership Real Talk, the no-nonsense guide for ambitious managers who want to have more impact and progress their career. I'm Pamela Langan, a job search coach and expert CV writer specialising in helping frustrated professionals land the jobs and pay rises they know they deserve.
And I'm Jackie Jagger, a leadership and mindset coach specialising in helping newly promoted and new to role leaders to avoid the dickhead trap and lead with confidence. Between us, we've helped hundreds of leaders and managers to find new roles, take ownership of their careers, and handle the challenges that job searches and leadership responsibility inevitably bring. And now we're joining forces to share with you what we know has worked for our clients.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode. Today, we are talking about the 5 hidden habits that could be undermining your leadership impact. Now, we've compiled these from many conversations that we've had with our coaching clients over the years. So we're going to give you the top 5. There's probably others that could come up, but these are the ones that we think that people do without even realizing it. And when you do realize you're doing it, this is where you can start making that change or doing something different. So we're going to go through our top 5. So Jackie, what is the first one?
So the first one is what we've called I'll just check with syndrome. And this is a really interesting one because I've noticed from my client base, this is often where people are naturally collaborative, where they want to be more measured and buy themselves some thinking time, but also where they don't want to overstep the mark and they don't want to make a decision that they then have to reverse later. So this is the point in time where rather than making a decision, your response to people is to give yourself thinking time. So you might not necessarily say, I'll just check with my boss or I'll just check with so-and-so from finance. But essentially, it's that habit of not making decisions so that you can go away and do some groundwork elsewhere. And I think what happens with this is people inadvertently undermine their own authority by over-checking some decisions. The more senior leaders that I work with, the complaints that they have of their team is very rarely that their team take too much initiative. Very often, the more senior leaders that I'm coaching, their complaint is that people don't take enough initiative. And so I think there can be this mismatch where people don't want to overstep the mark, don't want to say yes immediately, but they undermine their own authority because the impression is, I've just got to go and check with so-and-so. And actually that undermines both sides of the relationship. It means that for the team, you don't seem like you're the one that's actually making the decision, but also you make yourself a bottleneck where you're taking things away, maybe to have a one-to-one with your boss or get their say-so or get their buy-in. And for your boss, that's potentially frustrating because they're often feeling, I just want you to make that decision.
Yeah, and it's a good point because there's also that thing as well where you're going back to your boss and you're asking them all the time. And I think what that can be an indication of is that you don't really know what is expected of you, what boundaries that you have, what limits you have. And I think if you're at that point where you're always just checking just to make sure, it's a good opportunity, isn't it, to sit down with your boss and say, what are the boundaries? Where can I make a decision up to? And then start owning those decisions. But sometimes taking that leap, it can be quite difficult, can't it? Because it's a different, I always feel like it's a different kind of mindset or like a different set of behaviors that you need to put into gear. And it can be hard to start trusting yourself. And I always feel like that is where that comes from. It's that real trusting yourself to make that decision, because like you said, you don't want to have to go back and switch something because you made a decision and maybe it wasn't the right one. So it's hard, isn't it? Like trying to get yourself to that point where maybe you understand the boundaries, but also you trust yourself to make those decisions.
Trusting yourself is a big part of it. That's when I have this come up with clients where they recognize that they maybe need to be more decisive, to make more decisions themselves or to make more decisions more quickly, that trusting themselves is often a part of it. And it's a part of, they don't want to risk other people judging them for the fact they've made a wrong decision. But in the meantime, people are judging them for the fact that they're not decisive enough. So they don't trust themselves and therefore they're holding back from making decisions. But in the meantime, people do still have perceptions. So I think you're absolutely right. It's recognizing and acknowledging that you won't make every decision right every time. It won't always be perfect, but the more that you get into the swing of it and start to trust yourself to make either the right decision or to be able to handle the consequences if it turns out that you do need to change that decision or reverse it later, when you can trust yourself to do either of those things, then you free yourself up to actually make the decision rather than go sense check it.
Yeah, and I think this is where we need to start normalizing that it's okay to make mistakes. Sometimes it's okay to run with something and change our minds. I think we're so set in the fact that everything has got to be perfect and everything has got to be just so. But in reality, it doesn't really work like that. But then we hold ourselves back, don't we, with that fear of judgment and all the rest of it. So it can be quite a tough one. But I think that's definitely one that can really help almost amplify your leadership impact immediately just by showing that you're that person that can take ownership and make that decision. So, number two, then, what is our number two?
So, the second one we've called the quick win trap. So, this is where you get drawn in, and we've done an episode before on balancing strategic and operational workload. And I think it's something that probably people do recognize that they do this, but they maybe struggle to know how to stop doing it. But in essence, it's that time where you end up prioritizing things that are urgent over things that are important. So you do really well with tactical, everyday stuff. You tend to meet most of the deadlines that you are set, but you don't put enough energy and attention to the longer term things, the things that are more fundamental. And so what that can lead to is you get a reputation as a troubleshooter, a fixer, a doer, more so than a leader. And that can be that you're thought of well in the role that you're in, but it can really stifle your career opportunities for future growth because you're not seen as being someone who brings that strategic thinking and planning to the table.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting point, isn't it, for internal promotions, because it's the internal side of things where you need to be really considering what kind of person am I coming across as, because you could be the best person at delivering things and achieving those quick wins. But actually, if they don't think you're strategic enough, you're never going to get that promotion. And we've spoken about how to be more strategic on the podcast before. And it's so true, isn't it? These are the things that you need to consider in order to make sure it links into personal brand as well, doesn't it? It's like, how am I coming across? What am I actually delivering? And what are people seeing as valuable as well?
Definitely. So you can end up going to an appraisal, a review with a list as long as your arm, or I've contributed this, I've delivered this, I've done a great job of this. But you still hearing maybe that feedback of you're not quite ready yet. And I think people get frustrated because people can't really articulate why that is. And very often this can be that pivotal point of, because you've done a great job of all the things taking responsibility for, you feel like I've proved myself, that I'm shown that I'm really good, I'm shown that I'm ready for the next level. But what people aren't seeing is the indicators of what they are expecting at the next level, which is more of that strategic approach.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think that leads quite nicely into number three.
It really does. And we've called this the always available signal. So for, again, so many of my clients where they are lovely people, they really care about their team in particular, but also internal and external customer service tends to be important to people. And so what happens is they feel a drive to respond really quickly, to not keep people waiting. And that really plays into that urgency over importance piece, because what you're doing is you're teaching other people to expect you to be immediately available, to be interrupted, and you're prioritizing their agenda over your own. Now, sometimes that might be the right thing to do, but you often create this pattern that is really hard to maintain, where you feel really distracted, you really feel overwhelmed, you don't feel like you've got any thinking time. And it means that other people have this expectation that you will drop everything to help them do anything at any point in time.
Yeah, and once you get into that cycle, it's hard to break it as well. And this is something that I was guilty of back when I was leading a big team. And because I was always available, they expected it. Even when I wasn't in the office, I was available at evenings, late at night, I was available. Same with the weekends. If anything went wrong, they can call me, even if it wasn't my team sometimes, because they know I'll always answer that phone. I've always got the phone with me. I'll always answer an email because I've got it on the phone. And when you get into that cycle, it's so hard to break it, because then people are like, where is she? Why isn't she answering at 10 o'clock at night? And that was one thing that I had to work really hard on, because you have that reputation for always being available. And then when all of a sudden you're not available, you don't want people then to think negatively about you. So then you're almost kind of rebuilding that personal brand. So I feel like that's a tough one, isn't it? If you're constantly available, how do you then start building in things to become less available?
And from that perspective, this is something that comes up a lot in my conversations with my first 90 days coaching clients, because when you go into a new role and you're trying to build relationships, there is often that drive that you want to be approachable, you want to be someone who people can talk to, you want to build trust and rapport. And so people can sometimes struggle to be able to balance that, with the tension of that, with building those boundaries in. And so I will really encourage people, when you're starting a new role, to consider, what are the expectations you want to set about your availability? What are the expectations you want to set about your boundaries? Because if you go in with that intention, it's far easier, to your point, than it is trying to unpick and put those in place later. So, yeah, for anyone that is starting a new role this year, definitely consider that as you go into it, and effectively start as you mean to go on, and consider how you can set that expectation. Because even though it might seem hard at the start, it's just going to seem 10 times harder if you try and do it later.
You're absolutely spot on with that. And in my experience, it was really hard to unpick it all, but it was much easier. Still not easy. I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's much easier to do it and set those intentions in the first 90 days. So, yeah, I would fully get behind thinking about what you want, or how you want to come across, how you want people to start communicating with you, and understanding how you work in that first 90 days is absolutely key. So, number 4.
So number 4, we've called the visibility void. So again, this probably links back a little bit to a couple of the previous ones. And this really is about not being intentional with building your profile beyond performing in the tasks that are part of your current role. So people often in the early stages of their career will get progression by being a top performer. That's how you believe that you're going to get your next opportunity. And the more senior the role is that you're aspiring to, performance is just a benchmark. It's just the entry ticket. It's not how opportunities are created. And so I think people feel like they create visibility and they create opportunities for themselves by performing well, and they put their energy and attention to that, when in reality, you really need to consider, how can I ensure that I am visible beyond just my relationship with my boss and the kind of stakeholders that I engage with as part of the tasks that are within my role.
Yeah, and that I think that's a big one, isn't it? Because it's so easy to get your head down and get stuck into the day to day and just be linking in with the immediate team and maybe the people that sit just outside of those. But when you get to a situation where you want to get promoted, where you want to change jobs for whatever reason, that's where then you'll go, I wish I would have been networking or building those relationships beyond the team so that other people in the business know who I am. And it's also a good one to task yourself with this year, isn't it? To go, how can I become more visible outside of my current team this year? What do I need to do? Now, sometimes when I'll talk to my clients about that, the first thing that comes to them is fear, the fear of being more visible. And I totally get it, because that can come up as well in all different ways, and even sometimes within business. But being visible is going to be the key to your progression within your career, with you building and tightening those relationships. So I would say if you're thinking about your objectives for this year, you should definitely become a more visible one of them.
It's interesting, isn't it? We were talking before we started recording about some outplacement work that we're currently doing, and with pretty senior people who are now at risk of redundancy, and recognizing now that they've under prioritized, in particular, external relationships. So I think visibility isn't just about being seen internally, building a good reputation within the business that you're in. That's a part of it, but a lot of visibility is about thinking about opportunities within your industry, within your sector, with people that are in the same function as you, perhaps in different organizations. There's a whole load of ways that being visible and building, and maybe part of the problem is visibility feels an icky word. It feels like you're trying to stand out, and it's a bit braggy, and culturally, if you're in the UK, that might feel tricky. But effectively, this is about relationship building and being really aware of ensuring that people know you exist. And they can't do that if you aren't intentional, because the people that have got opportunities that might be valuable to you aren't going to come looking for you. So you've got to consider, what is your career aims? Where might you want to have opportunities? And how can you start to build relationships that will allow some of that?
Yeah, I think that is absolutely spot on, especially when it comes to career progression and job searching, because most people don't think about their network until they start job searching, or until they're thrown into job searching because they've been made redundant, or there's been a settlement agreement or something like that. And then they're almost starting to create that network from a place of fear, and you don't build relationships in the same way. So yeah, so definitely start thinking about that for this year. Okay, then. So, what is our final one? What's number 5?
So, the final habit is what I've called the communication mismatch. And this is something that I have to say I was definitely guilty of in my career. And it's where, in essence, you communicate with someone based on what comes naturally to you and how you would want to be communicated with, rather than how they want to be communicated with. And so, as an example with this, what I find is with coaching clients, as they get more senior, one of the things is that people that are more senior than them are often incredibly busy, 1,000,001 priorities, and they feel like they've got to convince those people and get buy-in for things. And they try and do that by giving lots of logical data and explanation as to why that should be the case. Whereas what that person actually needs, given that they're really busy, is bullet points. I think we should do this because of this and this. And at that point, that person can either agree, disagree, or ask for more information. But if you go in trying to convince them based on the way that you feel from all of your thought process is logical and rational, you'll often lose them, because they just don't have time. It's not that they're not interested, it's just that they just don't have time to listen and process all of that. So that's a really common one that I see, is that if you're at a management or leadership level and wanting to become more senior, your communication often has to become more succinct, more to the point, and based on what's going to allow that person to get the headlines very quickly, rather than the full pattern of what's going to explain everything that's in your thought process.
Yeah, and I think when you get to that point where you can just give somebody the headlines, and where you're, as you say, you're giving them the headlines, and then if they need more information, they can ask for it, rather than the other way around where you try and pack everything in and they just, I haven't got time for this, just give me the key points. And it just makes it so much smoother, doesn't it, when you do that?
And I also see it the reverse, interestingly, where, for example, people will go into a senior meeting and expect to get buy-in within that meeting, and they haven't recognized that at a senior level, the way that decisions get made is that you have to have a lot of communication before the meeting. So the meeting is the sign-off point, and actually you need to do a lot of the communication groundwork outside of that forum, so that people, so you've got advocates who are going to understand what you're about and advocate for it, so that people that do want more data or more detail will already have some of that to reassure them. So I see the other side of it as well, where people try and get things done really quickly because they hear that first bit of advice, but they perhaps don't recognize that communication preferences within that room vary, and they're not going to get the buy-in that they want from everybody just from that one piece of communication.
Yeah, do you know what? Just as you're talking, then I was just thinking about a conversation that I had like early on in my leadership career, and we had to go into a meeting and we had to get buy-in from all of these different like different leads from across the business. And my manager at the time, I was like, how do we do this? It was probably one of the first times I'd ever done it. And she said, what you need to do, Pamela, is you need to go away and create some alliances. And I was like, what does that even mean? And like, I literally had to go away and Google it, because I was like, what does she mean? Anyway, I quickly realized that is the best way to influence those situations, isn't it? You create those relationships, you understand people's perspectives before you get into that room, so that when you deliver that information, they're already to a certain degree bought in, and you've already done most of your job prior to that meeting. And that, for me, that was a huge game changer, because I was like, really? Do people really do that? And it does work really well, because you're not then trying to gain that buy-in from that meeting. It's not the first time they've heard of it or understood your perspective, or the first time you've understood their perspective as well. So yeah, I really like that way of doing things.
And I see this on other levels as well, and smaller examples where, for example, someone who really cares about people will talk about, to try and get buy-in, they will communicate about the impact on people of a project, an initiative, or what have you. And if the person that they're talking to doesn't have that same perspective, then arguments about people are not going to be convincing for them. Arguments about commercials might be convincing for them, and vice versa. If you're someone who's very commercial, and this is probably where I was at, of very commercial, and you don't naturally consider the people, then if you present a commercial argument and you haven't talked about the impact on people, then for someone that holds that as something that's important to them, if they haven't heard that in what you communicated, then you're going to struggle to be influential with that person as well. So even in individual conversations, in much smaller discussions, I think that's where you can create friction or tension that doesn't need to be there. If you can consider, what do I know about this person or this group of people that I'm going to communicate with? What is it that is important to them? How do they like to be communicated with? Then you can create the communication with the intention of being influential, as opposed to just either opening your mouth and seeing what comes out, or typing the email and pressing send.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that. And I think if you're listening to this episode and you're thinking, these are some of the things that I've been doing, it's an absolutely perfect time now to think about how you can move forward with these things and start progressing in your career. And as usual, make sure that you rate and review the podcast so that more people can come and listen. And if there's anything you would like us to cover, then please let us know. And if you do need any further support, then get in touch with one of us and we'll be more than happy to help.
Exciting news from us. If you're an ambitious leader or manager earning 50k or more and you're ready to take your career to the next level, we have an opportunity for you. Introducing Catalyst Career Club, your secret weapon for unlocking career success. As a member, you'll get access to monthly live training sessions, exclusive job opportunities, and the ability to get personalised advice from us on your toughest career challenges.
We've helped thousands of driven leaders like you secure significant pay rises, land dream roles, and thrive in their careers. And now we want to support you in achieving your most ambitious career goals too. Membership is just $6.99 per month with no contract or tie-in. And as a special bonus for being our podcast listeners, you can use the code podcast at checkout to get your first month for just £1. Head over to pamelalangan.com/Catalyst Career Club to sign up now, and we'll see you inside.